Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're going way back, thousands of years back, to explore the life of King David.
A life full of, well, let's just say, unexpected turns.
Exactly. And we'll be pulling those details from Lesson 40, King David, a special king for Israel, which, as you'll hear, tells quite a story.
It does paint a very vivid picture, not just of David, but of the whole concept of, like, lineage, you know? Legacy, how one life ripples through time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And speaking of lineage, how far back can you trace yours? I mean, just think, we're about to dive into one that spans, well, millennia.
It is fascinating to think about, isn't it? How much impact a single life can have. And David's story, well, that's a prime example. But to really get him, we got to start with, well, the setting. So picture this. The Israelites are in Canaan after escaping Egypt, right? They're in this period of judges, kind of a wild time, but they start wanting a king. You know, someone powerful, like all the other nations.
That's so human, though, isn't it? To look around and think, oh, I want what they've got. But I'm guessing that wasn't exactly part of God's plan.
Well, their demand for a king does show this, like, tension, you know, between what humans want and what God has in mind. And that's where King Saul comes in. Lots of promise at first, but let's just say things take a tragic turn.
Right, and that pretty much ends his family's rule, right?
It does. Lesson 40 really digs into Saul's reign, showing how, well, his own ambitions sometimes clashed with God's guidance.
It's a good reminder that even those who seem, chosen can still stray. It makes you wonder how God picks who comes next.
And that's where we meet David. This future king, he starts out as, well, a simple shepherd, good with a harp, surprisingly deadly with a sling. Not exactly your typical ruler.
Okay, but the David and Goliath story never gets old, right? The image of this, shepherd kid facing down a giant, epic.
Oh, it's a classic underdog tale, that's for sure. But it also shows us something deeper. David's victory, it wasn't just, brute strength. It was about his trust in God. And get this, even after that, his path to becoming king. Not exactly a smooth ride. He spends years avoiding Saul, who's pretty jealous, by the way.
So even with his life on the line, he respected that Saul was, well, God's pick, even if Saul was trying to kill him.
Exactly. David understood God's timing. He could have just grabbed power, right? But he waited, let God's plan play out.
Wow, that's incredible. So how does he actually become king then? What happens?
It's a series of, key events. He becomes king over all of Israel, captures Jerusalem, and get this, brings the Ark of the Covenant to the city. We're not just talking military stuff here. This was, strategic, really solidified his leadership.
He was building something new, right?
Yeah.
Uniting everyone and making Jerusalem, the center. Not just politically, but religiously, too.
Exactly. Jerusalem becomes the heart of everything. In David, he's leading it all. But then, well, another twist. David, seeing how great God is, wants to build this amazing temple. Something way better than that tent-like tabernacle they had.
Seems logical, right? If you're king, you believe in God. Why not give him the best?
His heart was in the right place, sure, but God had other ideas. The prophet Nathan shows up, and his message throws David for a loop. He says, "You are not going to build me a house, David. I will build you one."
Wait, hold on. Did I miss something? God's going to build David a house. Like an actual house? What's going on?
This is where it gets interesting. That word house, it takes on a double meaning. It's not just like bricks and mortar. It's about lineage, a dynasty. God's promising to establish David's family, ensure kings will come from his line forever.
Wow. Talk about a plot twist. So no temple for David, but he gets a whole dynasty. And wait, you said his son builds the temple?
Yeah, God even reveals that part. David's son, Solomon, he'll be the architect.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. A lot of layers to this.
There are. And this is what leads to, well, what some consider one of the most important agreements in the whole Bible.
Yeah.
The Davidic covenant. It echoes that Abrahamic covenant from way back, but adds a whole new dimension to God's promises.
So what exactly did God promise in this covenant? What was in it for David?
3 big things. First, land. David's descendants, they'd rule over a secure and prosperous land. Second, offspring. That lineage would keep going, always kings from his family. And finally, blessing. This dynasty, it would ultimately bring blessings to everyone, not just the Israelites.
That's huge. Like God saying, hey, I got your back, David, and your family's back, forever. But how can anyone guarantee something like that?
It shows God's faithfulness, right?
Oh.
His ability to keep his word even over, well, thousands of years. Think about it. At this point, he'd already been keeping that Abrahamic covenant for over 1,100 years. So when God says forever, he means it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm still thinking about this lineage thing. Was there, any clue beforehand that David's family was, destined for greatness?
Oh, there's another piece to this puzzle. Way before David, centuries before, Jacob prophesied that the scepter, the symbol of kingship, wouldn't leave the tribe of Judah. And guess what? David, direct descendant of Judah, fulfilling the prophecy.
Wow, that's incredible. Like everything was falling into place, all these like prophecies and events lining up perfectly.
It really highlights how connected everything is in the Bible. But here's the big question. What does this forever promise really mean? Not just for David's family, but for all of us. What does it have to do with our lives today?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Forever. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
empires crumble, civilizations vanish. Does David's story really like matter to us now?
It does, and the impact might surprise you. We think of covenants as, legal things, but this one goes way deeper. It's about a spiritual inheritance, this connection that goes beyond time.
Okay, spiritual inheritance. I'm listening. Is this like bigger than just David's kids and grandkids?
If we zoom out, see the big picture, this Davidic covenant, it points to something much bigger. The coming of a Messiah, a descendant of David who'd set up an eternal kingdom.
Wait, are we talking about?
That promise to David, it finds its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ. He's often called, the son of David.
So this ancient promise made thousands of years ago, it's like directly linked to Jesus. That changes everything.
Yeah.
How do we know that connection's real?
All through the New Testament, you see this lineage emphasized. Matthew's gospel, for example, it traces Jesus's family tree way back, all the way to David, highlighting that connection, fulfilling the promise.
That's fascinating, that this echo through history ending with Jesus. But you said spiritual inheritance. What's that mean for those of us not, directly related to David?
This is where it gets really interesting. It's not just about like physical family. It's about a spiritual one too. Through faith in Jesus, we're grafted into this line, this lineage of blessing. We become, in a way, heirs to those promises made to Abraham and David. It's a relationship with God that goes way beyond our earthly stuff.
So less about who your great-great-great-grandpappy was, more about being connected to Christ. That's powerful. This covenant's still like active, shaping lives today.
Precisely. It reminds us that God's plans, they're huge, they span generations, and his promises, they last. Even though David's earthly kingdom, well, it faded, the spiritual kingdom through Jesus, that keeps growing.
It's mind-blowing, Stuff from thousands of years ago still affects us, speaks to how timeless God's truth is and the power of those promises. But let's be real, David wasn't like some perfect saint. He messed up, big time.
You're right. It's not all, sunshine and roses. David's story, it's not a fairy tale. He faced temptation, made bad choices, and, well, he dealt with the consequences. Lesson 40 doesn't shy away from that. It shows us, even those God chooses, they're human.
Makes him relatable, though, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't perfect, just a guy wrestling with his own stuff, making mistakes. That whole Bathsheba thing and the family drama. Talk about a scandal.
It was. And those moments, the weaknesses, the failures, they make his story even more powerful. He's not an icon on a pedestal. He's a man who struggled, who messed up, but still found redemption.
And even with those flaws, God stuck to that covenant. He saw something in David, something beyond the mess-ups. What does that tell us about God, you think?
It's a key takeaway. God's love and grace, they reach even those who fall flat. He doesn't just ditch us when we fail. He offers forgiveness, a way back.
That's good to know. We all mess up, but God's grace is bigger. But how do we square that forever promise with the fact that David's kingdom did end? What's that mean for this eternal kingdom through Christ?
Great question. And it leads us to some deeper thinking. Yeah, David's earthly kingdom, it didn't last. But the spiritual one through Jesus, it works on a different level, not bound by borders or, human power struggles.
So the forever part, it points beyond earthly empires and dynasties.
Exactly, to something spiritual, a kingdom of righteousness, justice, peace. And that'll outlast any earthly kingdom.
That's powerful. It gets forever a whole new meaning. But I'm still curious, how does David's story, with all its ups and downs, serve as a guide for us today?
David's life, even though it happened way back when, it shows us timeless stuff about human nature, our relationship with God. We see ourselves in his struggles, his hopes, his failures, how he found redemption. His story tells us about faith, about obedience, about God sticking by us, and how grace can change everything.
Like a reminder that we're all on this journey, right? With twists and turns, good times and bad. But even when we're messing up, God's love is there. And his promises, they hold true.
Beautifully said. It's not just an old story. It's the human experience, hope, struggle, and then finding that redemption.
And we're not alone on that journey.
Right.
Part of something bigger, something that goes back generations and
Mm.
keeps going into eternity.
Exactly. Brings us back to that question we started with. What does this forever promise mean now? How do we connect these old stories to our lives?
Right. Easy to get lost in the history, but we got to make that bridge to today. What can David's story teach us about, living in the 21st century with all its challenges and opportunities?
Well, I think the answer's in realizing that God's still working, just like he was back then. Still weaving stories together, fulfilling promises, offering grace and a second chance.
So it's not just looking back, but looking forward with hope, with expectation.
Exactly. The Davidic covenant, it's all about that eternal kingdom, that line of blessing. It points us toward a future full of hope, full of purpose. God's story isn't over, and we get to be a part of it.
I love that. Like we're invited to something bigger than ourselves, something that connects us to this legacy of faith, of being faithful.
And, as we've been talking about David, we've met some pretty amazing people, right? Prophets, kings, warriors, even that shepherd who took down a giant. What sticks out to you? What resonates with you personally?
For me, it's that faith, how strong it was, even when things were a mess.
Mhm.
David messed up big time, but always went back to God, asked for forgiveness. We've all been there, right?
That's what gets me too, honestly. That's what makes his story so powerful. Faith isn't about being perfect, is it? It's about knowing God's love, his grace are there even when we trip up.
Yeah.
And that message, it runs through the whole Bible, gives hope to anyone who's ever felt like they blew it.
Yeah, it is comforting knowing we're all works in progress.
Yeah.
And that God's love is always there, always ready to help us get back up.
Yeah.
But we've been talking about David as this big figure. What about the everyday forever promises?
Yeah.
How do those work?
That's a great question. And it's where things get really, really personal. As we finish up our deep dive into David's life, think about this. God's plans, they often show up in the most unexpected ways. He might not call us to be kings or warriors, but he wants all of us to be part of his story.
It's like we each have these gifts, talents, a specific role to play. And even if it seems small or ordinary, it's all part of this bigger picture God's putting together.
Exactly. But so as we think about David, his life, what he left behind, think about the forever promises in your own life. What might seem ordinary now, but God's using for something bigger. What are you creating that will last? What kind of impact are you having on the world?
Those are big questions. It's hard sometimes to see past the everyday stuff, to see God working in the little things.
It is. But who knows, maybe generations from now, someone will look back at our lives and see how God used us, even with all our flaws, to change things.
Now that's something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into King David's life and exploring those powerful forever promises. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep diving deep.